Hello, everyone. During the last 1.5 years, pandemic, quarantine, lockdown, and social distancing have guided our actions, emotions, relationships, and life in general. Many have lost their loved ones. Many others have lost their jobs. And even after such a long battle with the crisis, we are not sure what lies ahead. Most of us have our own stories to share, but what comes out as a common picture is that life since 2020 has been immensely stressful and nothing close to our normal lives. And that brings us to the moot question of today's talk. What is the impact of the pandemic on our mental health? And should mental health be a priority in the ongoing crisis management? On behalf of Bengalis and Bhartiyas in Hessen Rhine-Main area, I welcome you all to BHRM's Reach Out, another edition of Talk with the Expert. Today we have with us Dr. Debanjan Banerjee, psychiatrist with the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, NIMHANS. Dr. Banerjee specializes in aging and old age mental health problems. He is actively involved in teaching, counseling, and research. He is in the editorial board of reputed journals and has several awards and distinctions to his credit. We are very honored and delighted to have you with us. We also have Piali Bhomik, the founder of BHRM and professionally an IT security architect working at the German Stock Exchange. We have with us Bitan Mollik, electronic engineer working with the Fraunhofer Institute. We also have Debanjan Mukherjee, junior scientist working in the field of cardiac sciences in the University Hospital Frankfurt. My name is Tusharika Mukherjee. I'm an organizational psychologist, and since this topic is very close to my heart, I'm very pleased to be asked to host this discussion today. So, Dr. Banerjee, I've been hearing a lot about the rise in depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and even suicidal thoughts. What do you think has emerged as the biggest mental health challenge during this pandemic? And how has the impact been different for different age groups? We have with us Bitan, who would like to share his personal experience.
Yeah, thank you, Tusharika. I would just like to share a personal story of mine, which is during the last, I would say, 1.5 year. Um, my working life has been completely changed. I no longer go to my workplace. The working place and the living place is more or less same, and this creates a lot of discomfort and agony because I do not have a clear separation between what is my working time and what is my personal time. So I would like to ask Dr. Banerjee if this situation, to deal with this situation, is it better to just do some kind of self-reflection, or do I need some kind of medical supervision?
Yeah, I'm audible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, thanks to BHRM for organizing this on mental health. I think even though we have a lot of ongoing discussion recent times related to mental health, uh, this is not something that we commonly discuss in our day-to-day lives. At the outset, I really think this is a good opportunity even for us to meet virtually and, talk about something which is probably going to be relevant for years from now. Now, at the outset, what Bitan said, I think I'd like to resonate that for most of the professions, for our profession, unfortunately, we have to be on the front lines. So work from home doesn't exist for us. But even in terms of our teaching, most of it has been online classes, and online education itself is something which needs a separate session to talk about. Now, answering Bitan's question, I think the one thing, that the pandemic really took away from us as humans was our structure. I mean, what makes us civilized and in the state that we are today? I think Tusharika will agree on me with this, even in psychological sciences. There is something called the circadian rhythm, which the body maintains for our different functions. Now, lives and living have both been equally affected. You know, you are in Germany, I'm speaking from India. I think both the countries and many other countries have had unique challenges in how our lives changed, our working places changed. Many of us have to balance working for home versus working from home. And not to mention that what Bitan spoke about the work environment. See, the reason why we go to office is manifold. We have a working setting, an environment, our colleagues. We know that we have a distribution between our personal and professional time. Now, there are times when at 1 o'clock I'm with my laptop. You know, I am running my family errands and consulting a patient at the same time. I'm teaching, you know, my students and at the same time probably attending another call. So there are certain boundaries which have really, really been blurred during this pandemic. We call it new normal, but I am still not sure personally whether it is really normal for humans to deal with this. One of the easy ways of, I won't say easy, rather, let me rephrase it by telling one of the possible ways of doing so is something very generic. You know, it may seem that you don't need a psychiatrist to tell this, but trust me, people try all sorts of exotic stuff, but do not try these things that I'm going to mention now. One is having a time schedule and a planning. So let's say you have your work environment and your work schedule now even infiltrating into your personal time. So have an idea as to when you want to spend time with your family, when you want to call your friends, and when you are planning to work, even if it is online. Second, have a clear cut work environment. I know that it may sound a little luxury for many of us. Many of us may be privileged to have it, but you know, I know many people who have just one setting for both living and working. But I still suggest that if you are working at one particular place, make sure that stays at your workstation. Do not bring personal discussions there. And the third thing is, unless it is a real demand from your work, try to avoid any form of digital contact at night time because it leads to immense amount of sleep disturbance. To answer Bitan's second question, see, there is a difference between stress and distress. We all are stressed during the pandemic. You know, I mean, if this is not a situation to be stressed about, I don't know when will we really be stressed, because this is just a normal human response. There have been millions who are dead, and you know, India was in a dire situation during the second wave. But we also have to understand what are the lines. You know, I really hate when people call grief loss. I myself have lost many of my near and dear ones during the pandemic. I'm sure all of you will resonate with that experience. These are not mental illness, you know, these are normal human emotions. But the line that separates what is stress and what is harmful stress should be ticked on. There are few very, very subtle yet very prominent signs. One, you feel sad for a prolonged period of time, let's say more than 10 days, 2 weeks, you're not really able to come back to it. It starts affecting your physique. You start having, your appetite goes off, you're not able to sleep days after days. Your social media use increases to such an extent that you don't even know how to control it. You start having weight loss. You have physical symptoms, headache, palpitations, body pain, which are unexplained. And most importantly, and most seriously, if you start having thoughts of that life is not worth living anymore. Yesterday was World Suicide Prevention Day, and I think in all the programs I kept mentioning that it is not about a day, it is about a life, and the first reason how we can prevent suicides from happening is understanding these subtle signs of distress. To summarize it in just one sentence, you may feel stressed due to a variety of reasons that COVID has brought us into, but when that spills on to interfere with your personal or professional life, that is the time probably when you need to seek professional help. And professional help does not just mean medicines. You know, that's a very common notion that we have, that if you go to a psychiatrist, you will immediately be prescribed medicines. If you do not need them, you will be prescribed either counseling or individual psychotherapy, but you need to take professional help when it is needed.
So, Dr. Banerjee, you spoke about the impact that the pandemic has had on our mental health. But if we speak about the children in the new normal, the rise in screen time has increased the prevalence of many diseases, including progressive myopia and sleep disorders in children. And secondly, the high rate of exposure can be seen as the primary reason for digital dependence, especially when online education has been mandated in many parts of the world. So, how do you see the effect of digital acceleration in children?
Yeah, thanks, Tusharika. I think that is something which uh, has been in very popular discourse since the pandemic started. See, online education is something that has been going on for a long time, but over the last 2 years nearly, we understood that how important it is, and we don't yet know, at least in my country, I don't know when we are going back to the routine schooling anymore. Now, before coming to that, I would like to take the first point that you mentioned, that how the pandemic has affected our mental health. See, I have a little bit different opinion here, and uh, in all the articles that I have written or I still continue writing, if you see the content, I always mention this, that this awareness about mental health, and by mental health, I mean psychological health as well as social well being, it needs to transcend beyond any pandemic. I mean, it's little ironic, that we had mental health deficits all years. In at least in India, we have one psychiatrist for 10 lakh population, psychologists even lesser, and mental health infrastructure, understanding stigma related to mental health is really something that we need to work upon. Was it there in 2019? Yes, very much. Now, it is ironic that you need a virus and a global large scale infection to act as an eye opener to help us understand that what mental health means to us. Nevertheless, I think the good thing, at least personally speaking, what I take and what I will take back from the pandemic for years to come are the lessons. When we have not got oxygen, when we have lost our near and dear ones, when we have seen deaths, at least there are times when I have seen people dying all around me in the emergency. What I did realize is that, very contrary to how it is portrayed in popular media, mental health is not it's not something exotic. It's not an exotic cup of coffee with one fine day you sit with in an evening. It's kind of a daily thing that you live in and live out. So unless we consider this to be a part of our daily routine, a part of our lifestyle, a part of how we live, and keep it on shelf for one fine day or occasion, probably we are not going to be sensitized about it. And I also tell my media colleagues, in fact, yesterday we had a session with many of our media friends, and always tell them that do not sensationalize mental health, rather sensitize. That's a difference. There may be difference of letters in the English words, but in real life, it makes an immense difference. Having said that, coming to your point of, digital lives, again, digitalization has been something which has been increasing ever since probably the last decade. Uh, One thing which really strikes me, I remember my childhood. I think many of you will remember your childhoods. And I still remember there was a point of time when my parents literally threw me out of the house so that I could play cricket. I don't see the present generation really that interested. They would play cricket, but virtually. Now, I'm not telling that is bad. See, there are extremely good effects of video games. It helps attention. Uh, it helps our cognitive development. It has a lot of immensely good effects on even people who have dementia, who have memory problems. But it's important to remember that there is a concept which is called social touch. Now, we have a collaborative project going on with IndicaSat and Harvard at this present moment, where we are actually seeing that how this deprivation of social touch during the pandemic, can have an effect on human minds. True that, it's not just about online education. Many times you will see that a screen is, a class is going on and the kid maybe is on another browser, either playing or chatting, or social media is open. And let me tell you, it is impossible to supervise, no matter whatever technology you use, you know. So what is happening is there is no substitute to a hug, a pat on the back, a huddle, a handshake, a group gathering. School is not just meant for education. It is also meant for sharing tiffins, running together, laughing together, meeting your teachers. Uh, and that is what helps a person in the cognitive development. I think Tusharika will agree with me on this, that it is not just about a place where you go open your books and study. So digitalization it's a dual-edged sword. I never tell it is all bad. There are ways when, if it has a controlled approach, it can be used for the benefit. But I think, you know, there is no one solution to it. You have to, education is mandated online, so there is no other way you are able to do it. It also depends on age groups. The approach that we take for preschool will not be the same as mid school and high school people. With adolescents and with youth, you have to kind of discuss with them, trust their goodwill, help them in understanding at what point social media usage becomes excessive. Again, you can use there is something called a digital log as to how much time you're spending on social media, how much time you are using in games, how much you are having a screen time. In fact, there are a lot of devices and smartwatches which have built-in feature of how much time you are using in a sedentary way. For children, I think it is really important. The routine that I was talking to you in reply to your last question, that sort of routine is kind of implemented by the parents, and the consequences of excessive use of screen is conveyed and discussed with the children as per their understanding and age. It will not help if you just dictate norms. You have to discuss with them, and you have to substitute that with quality family time. You cannot take off something, not replacing it. I have seen on numerous occasions a family of three, a 3 BHK flat. The child is busy in games. The mother is busy watching something online, cooking show. The father is working online, which is fine. But if that happens all throughout, then there is no family interaction. and that creates a void. And probably that void leads us to seek sensation through social media. So if we have to prevent that void from happening, we have to substitute it with social connections, be it in person or be it digital.
Dr. Banerjee, I think you gave us very, very insightful analysis or ways of how to curb the effects of digital acceleration in children. And we are thankful to you for that. And actually, your points bring me to this question of the new normal, how we as adults are now coping up with the situation. And it brings me to the concept of hybrid meetings. So basically, I might call myself to be one of the representatives of the Indian Expatriate Society here in Germany. And most of the adults here are either working in IT or in the research field or in the finance sector. Some of us are based out of Frankfurt, so we are at the hub of the finance sector in Germany. And the new buzzword in the corporate culture now was in the recent times is since the beginning of the pandemic is hybrid. So first there was like complete lockdown, and then we went on this to this gradual phase of 20% in the office or 30% in the office, and some days, some weekdays in the office and some other working days from home. And this brought to us to the concept of hybrid meetings, where some of us are in presence at office and some of us are are online. I myself, as we also had some seminars to cope with the strategies, how to plan a hybrid meeting, how to cope with a hybrid meeting. I personally found it, and I am in IT for like 10 years now or more, but I personally found it so challenging because I don't know, sometimes I ask the question, does it even make sense, or is the human mind equipped with something as a hybrid meeting? For example, if I am sitting at a place, when a person is talking, I don't, his body language, everything together comes so much, depicts such a great message to us. I mean, in totality. But on the digital media, I just listen to you, or on the digital platform, I mean, I just listen to you, but I have so much more tendency to get distracted, or I get so much little from the message that you're trying to give me. So basically, I mean, I'm flabbergasted, or I was really thinking of this question and really want to ask you, is the human mind really equipped to handle something like the hybrid model of meetings or work culture?
Yeah, thanks. I think that reminds me that we have a hybrid seminar upcoming in Delhi. So you are right. I think everything has become hybrid, and life has in fact become hybrid. I don't think just meetings. Because as I was mentioning, that the usual set format in which we kind of imagined our day, our interactions, everything has gone, it's gone disarray. Now, I do understand that hybrid meetings or interactions are a halfway through between what we went into during lockdown and what we were in pre-COVID. And that is also probably the most pragmatic thing to do. I am not very sure if I can tell that about in India right now, because cases are still increasing of late. And we don't know, there is a lot of word discussion going on about third wave. So how far but as far as I know, many hybrid meetings are getting converted into purely online mode. Because see, the first factor that comes, so let's say you were in a lockdown, and then one fine day you hold a hybrid meeting and you tell someone that now you can attend. It's very vital to understand that a fear has got so deep rooted in our minds, even with vaccination, that many may not want to go to a place which is expected to be crowded. At least I can talk about myself. I won't. I know that I'm a frontliner. I work with patients. I have all the risk of getting, COVID anytime. But even then, I will not take a conscious decision of going to a conference or a seminar, where you will be, obligated to sit the crowd in a compact room. Whether humans are ready for it, I don't know. We were not ready for the COVID either. But, I think what I really like and admire about ourselves is that we all are amazingly resilient. So no matter what comes in, we can always find the way out. That may not be the right way always, but that is how life moves on. Now, one of the factor in hybrid model is also to limit. I mean, let's say you are having a conference. So again, let me talk from my stream because that's the best example that I can give. We have an annual conference of the Indian Psychiatric Society. Now, in different meetings over the last, it has already got postponed. In different meetings, we have been discussing, debating on whether it should be held in hybrid or online. Now, let's say you hold it in hybrid model. How do you restrict who will come online and who will come offline? That's another issue. Because let's say I think I'll come online and then ultimately on the day I feel like traveling. So if the number crosses a certain threshold, you will not be possibly able to maintain the safety protocols, isn't it? So that's another, these are pragmatic public health challenges. What is most difficult, as I think Piali were very justified in mentioning, is that when I'm interacting digitally with you, not only are there distractions outside, but there are also distractions inside. Let's say today you and Bitan are talking, or you and Tusharika are talking, or Devanjan is telling something. If I don't like it, I have thousands of options in front of me on screen to browse, to see, to check. I can talk to you, check my mails at the same time. In-person communication, you may have not that many options. If you want to maintain a social etiquette, you cannot really pull out your mobile and check. The other important factor is beyond distraction, conferences and meetings, apart from academic discourse and work related stuff, are also meant for what I was discussing a little earlier about, social touch, meeting people, networking, meeting friends, meeting people whom you kind of only meet once a year in the conferences. Now, these taken off, not to mention very delicious and elaborate lunches and dinners. Okay, I didn't talk about that. So these taken off from our world, I think the essence of interaction has gone. Even now, when I have to talk to a friend or meet a friend online, I don't feel that much interest because it's just like any other. To me, even if I change my virtual background to any country in the world, I'll still be in my room. Okay, so that's the point. And at one point of time, I think you have all heard about something called Zoom fatigue.
Yes.
So, this constant staring at the screen, and especially with people with so powerful eyes like me, a very high myopia, it becomes extremely disturbing. And for hours at a stretch. In fact, I have myself realized that even though we have telepsychiatry guidelines now, we can see patients online, which is a fantastic thing from both sides of the table. It is very, very taxing. Because you cannot afford to miss something online, and you cannot really complete all aspects of a clinical assessment online. And I'm sure all of you will resonate with me on this, that every single mail or idea of a webinar now scares you. because it is no different. It's that same screen in front of you. And in fact, even if there is something that you want to convey across, you cannot really convey it the way you expected when you would have had a personal interaction. But having said that, I think based on circumstances, vaccination, logistics, hybrid model is probably the best idea as of now. It solely depends on how fast you can transit back to pre-COVID times. And I think as a community, we can only wish that that comes soon.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. Absolutely. When you were talking about the personal touch with your patients, that it's very important to see a person in person to give a full assessment, or to have that relationship or bonding built up with the friend, because you said all the friends, practically I don't have any individualistic experience if I'm talking to a friend, yeah, because everybody's coming to me in the same format. This brings me or us maybe to the next point we were thinking, or I was also thinking on these lines, about the human touch and relationships, since we have moved from children to adults now. I have a funny or interesting experience to share. In Germany, I see this year the amount of marriages have gone high. Usually, the German culture is like that a lot of people live together without going into an official marriage, but they are like partners living informally together or unofficially together. And the marriage rate has gone up to an extent. I can quote my German colleague, or who's also my boss. He has attended 3 bachelor's party this year, and I'm like, are you? And he's in his mid 30s. It's not like he's in 20s or something where everybody is like in the Las Vegas mode. Let's get married, and then okay, bye bye after some years. But I'm like, okay, this is usually this is very uncommon. But then again, I think I would like to ask Bitan here.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually a difference in opinion here, because what I hear a lot from my colleagues, because like, okay, I'm also in that age where people are getting married, and even after their marriage, they are struggling a lot in order to keep their relationship, because mostly it stems from the fact that you have a continuous sharing of your living space, and you are more or less like kind of stuck at one place. You do not have um, a private time or a space where you can vent out, and then you tend to lose your temper quite easily, and this creates a lot of separation between partners and friends, and of course that lead to mental depression. So many of my friends, they tend to ask me like, when is the right time to seek help from the doctor, like when we are struggling with this situation, or when we are already completely out of the situation. Let's say there is a breakup or a divorce or something has happened, and then it leads to even more painful situation. So what is the right, like the relationship counseling thing, which is more general in let's say Western world, is not that common in the eastern part of world, let's say in India, or let's say Southeast Asia. We tend to avoid such things. We try to resolve things within ourselves, any kind of conflict, especially among the partners or friends. But yeah, what would you say, Dr. Banerjee? What is your take on this? When is the right time to seek help when you are struggling with such a problem?
Yeah, I think thanks Piali and Bitan for bringing this up, because uh, in fact, this is one of the most, how do I put it, burning issue, human relationships. I would rather extend it not only in terms of marriages, so persons who are planning to marry or newly married, also married couples who have been separated during lockdown, uh, parents children relationship with your senior parents, and of course people who are in a joint family or extended family. So see, because I edit and I closely work with sexual health, over the last 1.5 years, there has been a marked rise in sexual problems within couples and partners without any explained reason. Now, as we always say that, human relationships are, they have biological components, they have psychological components, and they have social components. You cannot neglect either. I started by telling that our lives and living, our structure of living has got disrupted. And the first thing that gets affected with that is your interpersonal relationships. See, there are three domains to it. One, if you are stranded during lockdown for a significant period of time, you will, to be very simple, you will miss your family, you will miss your partner, you'll want to go back. But remember that any form of cohabitation or intimacy is fraught with a fear of contracting a virus which has killed millions. And this especially happens to people who are frontliners, who have to go out for work. And like HIV, we do not have a set guidelines on how do you really, be with each other, share time, develop intimacy with the pandemic going on. For those who are interested, you can actually check in my ResearchGate profile. There is a specific article which is an advocacy statement for sexual relationships during the pandemic. And it categorically gives you a lot of details about the do's and don'ts related to the infection per se, what can lead to, what protective measures you should take. But that is just one part of it. I always tell people that let's not confuse intimacy with sexual relationships, because intimacy is it's a bigger picture. Sexual relationship is a part of that. You can be intimate even without being sexually close. Now, there are again few other points here. So see, as Bitan mentioned, the problems that can happen in both spectrums. If you are staying far off, there's a different dimension. If you are staying 24/7 under the roof, it's another problem, because there is an issue with space, your own personal time, one person's work infiltrating on the other person's work, not to mention the rampant rise of intimate partner violence, which is a very, very concerning thing. In fact, domestic violence has significantly gone up in India, and we do not yet have a lot of systematic data, but the so-called registered helplines that US, UK, different countries of Europe have, they have nearly registered triple, quadruple amounts of calls that have come for elder abuse and domestic abuse. Now, the reason to tell this is not a finger pointing at any one gender, but there will be a problem arising between the two persons. If your dynamics, your living, and your schedule gets interrupted. This can also happen with elders, because many times, though we know that older people are more vulnerable to the pandemic, and I kind of, I always speak for them because I work with senior citizens, that's my field. But I have actually felt, working with people, that their autonomy and respect has been disregarded. I mean, I'll just give you a charity begins at home. I'll give you my own example. When that really started happening, I simply told my grandmom, you shouldn't go out of the apartment. That's it, full stop. I didn't really ask her that, these are the things happening, these are the issues, these are the risks that you have. So you are not able to go out for a walk. So how do you rather want to spend the time instead? See, for many people, having one walk in the day is the only time of recreation. It's the only time when you meet your peers, you discuss with your friends, you are out of that four walls and you are in contact with nature. Taking that away from you or from me may not make much of a difference. But taking that away from a 75 or 85-year-old can rattle their lives. So I'm just telling you this as an example of how the issues can happen between different people. For many, considering that still a lot of cultures have a patriarchal form of society, good or bad, no matter whatever you discuss, you have to accept that it exists. There's no point in denial. So for many of those societies, everything has transited to work from home. So for the female partner, it's very difficult to accommodate because this was not her practice before. And as I mentioned just some 10 minutes back, that again, ironically, the lockdown, at least the 4-phase lockdown in India, in many countries, they have created an unique opportunity for us to spend time with our family, something which was long due, to nurture our hobbies, mend our old relationships. But we humans, being humans, have chosen to stick to what we were, So for many, I think lockdown has been a fantastic experience. They were happy to be with their family. Their spouses didn't have to go for work. They could be with their parents. But for many, there were issues with living space, overcrowding, differences in opinion, entrapment together in a living space, differences in living arrangements, being stuck with joint families, intimate partner violence, issues with children, and especially, as Bitan was mentioning, newly married people, because what you thought of or how you imagined your life after marriage may not have turned out the same way due to the pandemic. Now, this was the background. To answer Bitan's question, I'll just mention it in one line. To seek help, it is never too early and it is never too late. Okay, so there is no correct time for it. Of course, if you ask me, I would prefer to repair an engine before it stops working. So before, I always tell this to every single couple that comes to me for couple therapy, that look, you are adults, I'm an adult. You don't need another adult to tell you whether you should stay in the marriage or not, or in this relationship or not. That's up to you. There is law, there are lawyers, there are divorce papers. If you want, you can go ahead with that. That is your choice. I am not sitting here to judge you, to opine who is right and who is wrong. I can only tell you one thing. If both of you have come to me today, it means somewhere you want to work on the difficulties that both of you are facing. So if you want to go ahead with ending this, please do. That's your choice. But if you ask me, I would tell, rather than taking a decision when your mind is rigged, why don't we professionally try to work out something and then you take an informed decision? I hope this helps. I thought I'll just tell this because this is the gist of it.
Yeah.
And let me be very true about it. As family therapists, as couple therapists, we don't create any magic. We only help people to understand the differences, and sometimes a neutral person sitting on the other side of the table helps you to reflect. So that's all that we do. But yes, if somebody is facing a relationship distress, it is always better to consult, take a professional help rather than taking it to the last stage. And I don't have any issue with the Eastern system of trying to resolve it by themselves, because to be very frank, we know that a lot of our parents, grandparents have done that. So there is no harm in that. But again, you have to understand what is your tipping point. And at the end, if there is any instance of domestic violence, there should be a no tolerance policy to that.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee, for the insights on this part as well. And also, I think the coping strategies and the guidelines that you have mentioned will be definitely ameliorating the health of the individuals who are kind of protecting themselves from COVID. However, there is another group of people who have already recovered from COVID. And my field, or rather, I would direct my question towards those individuals who have recovered from COVID. So in your talk, you were mentioning about the three different components, the biological, psychological, and social. From there, as Piali was mentioning, I would rather highlight on the biological or the physiology or the pathophysiological conditions of these recovered patients from COVID. So are these patients, are they prevalent or susceptible to further cardiovascular diseases, or say, for instance, any other neuronal diseases like amnesia, sleeplessness, or even long-term effects, uh, for example, dementia or things like that, which can uh, have its long-term effects on these COVID affected individuals? And if that's so, is there a way to detect them and to mark those individuals somehow by biological means, since you are already working with in the clinics and you have seen patients, and after the second wave there has been a huge number of affected patients who have also recovered from COVID. So are they more susceptible or vulnerable to further mental or any other pathophysiological diseases as such? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Debanjan. I think that's something which the global scientific community is trying to understand more and more as of now. To give you a very, how do I put it, a very brief overview, we exactly don't know yet. Probably it is too early to say as to what it really holds. There are certain things we know. There are certain insights we have got from the earliest SARS viruses. So the viral structure of COVID-19 is similar to its earlier congeners. So we hypothesize that the effects may also be similar. You can actually refer to one of our detailed papers that we have published in Asian Journal of Psychiatry, which exactly talks about the neuropsychiatric effects of COVID infection. Now, there are two parts to it. One, how the pandemic affects mental health, which we have already discussed. I understand that you are interested in knowing that how the virus per se can affect you. See, there have been two very like quite rigorous and quite large studies which are published in Lancet in March 2021 in Lancet Psychiatry. Both of them show that people who have severe mental illness and dementia are more prone to develop a severe COVID infection. One side of the story. Second side, the other way around, people who have had developed COVID, if you follow them down 6 months down the line, there is a concept of something called long COVID. So, which is not classical respiratory symptoms, but more of cardiac, muscular, neuropsychiatric problems. So, what the study showed was that nearly 18%, which is not a less number, people had neuropsychiatric issues. And I'm talking about a huge population. This is nearly 40,000 people that they have studied. Okay, we yet don't have a systematic data coming published from India yet. We are in the process of that. Hopefully it will happen soon. But definitely the risk of new onset epileptic attacks, stroke, blood clots in the brain, memory disturbances, confusion, especially with increasing age, and chances of depression are definitely high due to the direct effects of the virus. And it is also proportional to the severity of the infection, whether you needed high flow oxygen, whether you needed ventilation, and the duration of time that you have spent in intensive care. So, yes, it is established now that the COVID virus is a neurotropic virus. By neurotropic, I mean it has a direct affinity towards nerve cells, but how it exactly affects psychiatric problems, I think we will only understand 3 to 4 years down the line, because what we see now is probably the tip of the iceberg.
Very true. It's too early to say. But thank you for the insights, and maybe in 4 years or 5 years time point, we'll have a better idea from this perspective.
Our discussion with Dr. Debanjan Banerjee will continue in the following episodes of Talk with the Expert series Reach Out.